welcome. Can you just talk about what your room has looked like through 7 practices this spring so far?
Yeah. Well, I think the big thing that we're focusing on right now is consistency. New system for guys that are returning. There's a couple guys that came over with us that have been in the system a little bit, so that transition's probably been smoother for them. But I think the big thing you look at day to day, are we taking the mistakes from one practice to the next? Are we taking them off the film? And more so, a lot of the, I wouldn't say issues, but things that we're working through right now are fundamental. And that's promising. They're picking up the scheme, they're picking up the install. It's just sometimes the fundamentals and the technique that come into executing at a high rate.
Marcus, welcome to you two. What's the working relationship like with you two guys, having 2 guys on your line?
It's been awesome. This isn't my first rodeo doing this style of thing, and this isn't the first time it's been done in the history of college football. But it's been awesome. I've been able to take some things from Coach Meyer to put in my toolbox that I didn't have prior to. You know what I mean? So I think it's good when you got a lot of resources like that from a coaching standpoint in the O-line room. Not only between us two, but also if you guys have been around, you also see the head coach gets involved in Indy drills too, being an O-line guy, as well as Quince, who just got here. So I think it's been awesome. I think the more guys you got in the room from a coaching standpoint, I think the more reps you can get with the guy, kind of split the groups up and whatnot, and expedite their growth and development, in my opinion.
We were watching the half lines yesterday, and on every snap, you guys could both coach somebody. Turner was there doing tight end, and Ryan happened to be. So it was like every snap, there could be immediate feedback. Is that, you like that setup?
Yeah, and I think yesterday was unique. We installed Coach Silverfield's favorite play. So he was heavily involved. He was in the meetings with us too. So there was a big emphasis on the execution of that play yesterday in practice. But I think what you have is a lot of resources around the offensive line, and I think that's a huge, I guess you could say, selling point. Like, we've utilized it in recruiting to this point. You got guys with not only experience as coaches, but have had success as players as well, have been in the position of these guys, and know what it looks like. And I think for them, I think they've kind of gravitated towards the amount of resources we've been able to put around them. And I think they view it, there's no weird dynamic. There's no egos in the room. I think if anything, we're a two-headed monster that, like, we have the same goal in mind. We want to win football games, and we want to help these guys reach their goals and their dreams to play the game as long as they can.
Any specific focus with you guys, guards, centers, tackles, anything like that, or is it just all offensive line?
Well, what we do daily is try to split it up so that it's not just me with the interior guys or Coach Johnson with the tackles, et cetera. So I think it's important that we're touching the entire room, and that I think maybe on the field I'm quicker to notice something happening on the interior. It's just a natural, like, I'm focusing in the middle. I think that's where my eyes tend to go. And Coach Johnson, I feel like, just in our interaction, I feel like he notices the stuff on the edges. But, no, it's not like Coach Johnson has the tackles. I have the interior guys. We flip back and forth. We split individual quite often. And I think for their understanding as well, they can come to both of us with questions. It's not like, hey, interior guys, you only go to Coach Myers, et cetera. So we try to divvy that up. Same thing in the meeting room as well.
How did things develop with Bryant during the portal process? Is there a history there with him, or how did this process unfold?
Yeah. You want to take it?
Obviously at that time, I think the first thing that comes to everybody's mind is size when it comes to that position, And obviously, Brian is a big young man, so that was the first thing that took place. Not only that, but his skill set and his ability, his length to play out on the edge was something we took notice to. And I think even with him on his side of things, he knew that there was a need at tackle here at that time, you know what I mean? And he saw an opportunity for him to get out on the field. And not only get out on the field, but to compete in this league at, in my opinion, the highest level. in college football. So I think on both sides there was mutual interest amongst each other. You know what I mean? And I think that was how we got the young man here.
Any history with him from recruiting or anything like that? It just
Not
popped
me.
up.
No, it was. I guess it shocked me when we got him and his old man on campus. It was like he had followed the Razorbacks even as a youngster, and he's from Lafayette, Louisiana, and this is the team, the Hogs are who he watched growing up. It wasn't LSU. It wasn't, you know what I mean? And so I think there was a real interest from him that went deeper than the opportunity here as well for him. But on top of all of his intangibles, he's played a lot of football too. He's got a lot of experience, and I thought that that was important with who we brought into that position. The immediate need, and then even I think it was easy for us to talk to him on not only coming here and furthering your development, right? Like at this point in his career, the next step as well of playing in the NFL, and able to show him I had a 6'8", 6'9" tackle at Memphis last season, who we had for 1 year, and he's looking like a day two pick right now, and advanced himself in a really short amount of time. So I think it was more holistic, where it's like, man, you could do this in the weight room, and this fundamentally, if we clean you up, and then in our system and how it translates to the next level. I think those were all big points for him that helped us seal the deal.
Marcus, you've got a unique perspective because you played for Coach Silverfield. What was he like back then? And just kind of
Actually, we both did.
Oh, y'all both did. Okay, so what was he like, playing for him, and how has he maybe evolved, since then?
I would say from my experience with him, he's been the same guy. Even going back to the Viking days, he was an attention to detail guy, even just as he is today. Especially when it comes to this position, having the right step or being in the right stance, having the exact hand placement, eyes, you know what I mean? Just the details that come along with this position. So to be honest with you, I really haven't seen very much of a change in him, to be honest with you. You know what I mean? He's the same guy that I knew essentially, it's crazy how time flies, but almost 20 years ago,
Yeah, probably a lot of the same. When I first met Coach Silverfield in 2014, I was a senior playing at the University of Toledo, and same deal. It was after his time with the Vikings and the Lions, and I think that as a young player, that's intriguing. A guy that was at that level, so you're all ears. But the amount of detail that he approaches the game with, and I think you see that even translate to him as in the head role now, or for this amount of time, like the detail with ball security, the detail with finish, the things that sometimes he watches on film isn't as much schematic during practice as it is it looking the way that the expectation is for us to win football games,
And you mentioned a second ago the two guys that came with you from Memphis, Malachi and Josiah. Just how have they helped bring the room along? Like how much are they coaching guys up on the side, or kind of how they helped?
Yeah, well, I kind of joked with Malachi when we recruited him to come over here, and I told him, you're going to have a leg up on everybody because you know the system. You know all the drills. You know what it's supposed to look like. You know what the expectation is in the style of play that we want to, the kind of edge that we want to have. And but I said, but the next step for you in your development, you need to come in here with an edge. You need to come here with a chip on your shoulder, And I think that's how he's approached it, is that I think every day he feels like he needs to prove himself to the SEC. You know what I mean? And he's been playing really consistent football, but I think it's been easy for them to kind of gel because Kittler's played a lot of football. It is, is a very, very smart football player. You can tell that he's played a ton and sees the game really well. But it's funny, we were talking the other day, like Kobe and Kittler had an exchange on a twist, and you could tell they've been doing it. There's a lot of reps behind it, where sometimes it might be a little more choppy between Kobe and Bryant as we continue to get comfortable next to each other. But yeah, I think having some guys in the room that know what you expect it to look like has helped, not necessarily push the message, but I think that they knew that they had to come in and prove themselves too.
And even for me, seeing some of the things that specifically Malachi, because obviously Josiah is still a young player, as a true freshman right now. But even just watching how Malachi takes command when it comes to communication. It's times he get Kit on the right page again because he's ahead in this system, but I see him communicating or over-communicating. Not only that, usually he's the first one in drills, to be the example setter in that room. You know what I mean? And even in the meeting room, usually if, a question is asked, he's one of the first ones to speak on it. You know what I mean? Again, because he's lived it and been there. But in my opinion, being around a young man a short amount of time, I think he's done really well, in my opinion.
Oh, I've got a couple of guys out of the portal that maybe not the headliners, but Weatherspoon and Robertson. What have you seen from those two kids, either one of y'all?
I think both of them are doing well. Great young men. They aim to please. They do everything you ask out of them. At first when they got here, in my opinion, you could kind of tell it was a different level that they played at and just the speed of the game. And I think they, over the last couple of weeks, I feel like they've gotten acclimated to that. But I think both young men are showing promise out there on the field. Both guys are hard workers, and obviously we need that to continue to improve from both guys. But they're doing a really good job out there.
If you go by just size and stuff, Weatherspoon normally wouldn't be on your radar, but what'd you see in him? I know he made all
The
conference.
Ohio State game.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that from immediately. Watching him specifically that game against that defense, and I saw that defense every day, and they pretty freaking good. And to be honest with you, Davion, he played a hell of a game, excuse my language, in that game, but he competed at a really high level and showed that he belonged.
I know you always want competition and no spot is secure in April, but you have had a first-team offensive line that has pretty much worked with each other through what we've seen. I mean, how important is this time period to build chemistry with maybe the five guys you have a lean or an inkling could be those five starters by the time September rolls around?
I think it's important. I think it's important for, the center's our big communicator. I think it's important for them to hear different quarterbacks as well. But I would say on average we're rolling out the same group. But, we got banged up kind of at the tail end of last week, and it forced our young tackles to have to get in there and play with that first group. Like the lineup we went out there on Saturday with was completely different than anything we've done all spring. And but what we were impressed by was the communication and their ability. Like, they didn't really stand out. I thought they went in there and functioned well. Some mistakes here and there, obviously, but and even I know we talked about Terrence a few seconds ago. Like, Terrence has played left tackle, right guard so far this spring and hasn't missed a beat. And as you kind of start shuffling things around, I think there's still a lot of time before we get to the first game. I think it's still important if you can move guys around to do it, to get them uncomfortable a little bit. And once we kind of get through the bulk of the install, that's when we'll start to shake things up and move guys around. Right now, I feel like it's important, just because it's so fresh for a lot of them, that as we're building the system in, that they grasp it before we start shuffling things around and making practice a catastrophe.
And then for either one of y'all, you both touched on them a little bit, but Kittler and Branham, having those guys back, I mean, how big of a boom is that, even if it is a new system, to have that type of experience? And what did you see from them on film last year? What's kind of the biggest focus in their developments right now?
Yeah, well, I think it's hard to say. So we recruited Kittler. I mean, he took an official visit to Memphis out of high school. I recruited him before he transferred here. Had him set up on an OV, but they locked him in before we could get him over there. So we've known him for a while. I would also argue I was Kobe Branham's first offer at the University of Memphis, so I've known him and his folks for a long time. So there's already a relationship there. There was already some rapport there with those guys. But, I think the beauty of having guys that have played a bunch of football, the system stuff, everybody runs zone. Everybody runs a variation of gap. It's just learning our terminology for those guys, where some of the younger guys, it's learning all of it. But I think, their experience in the SEC, some of these environments we're going into, maybe some of the people we're going to see next season, But I think where I've been really impressed with them is how hungry they've been to improve. And you look at even how they've changed their bodies since January, right? I think Kittler came back at 287 pounds, something like that, and he's up to 305. And then you look at Kobe, he might have come back, he'll hate me for saying this, probably like 339, right? And we got him peeled down under 330, and he's moving a lot better. And he'll tell you the same thing. So, I think that they both understand Kobe's still a young guy, and a lot of things to improve on. And Kittler kind of on the back end of his career, it's a lot of fundamental things. But I thought, from watching Kittler last year, his biggest strength is how athletic he is. Yeah, he's very smart and those things, but it was like, man, listen, like I'm going to need you to be able to sit down on a 330-pound bull rush down the middle. All right, like we're going to have to do that. And so kind of helping him round out the tail end of his game. But they've been real receptive,
And Marcus, you said earlier today that you've been a part of some dual coaching offensive lines before, and it's very common. I guess just what are the biggest benefits to having multiple guys? You talked about Silverfield even chipping in, but to have two guys dedicated to the offensive line every day, what's the biggest benefit from that?
Again, to me, the biggest benefit is you're able to split guys up. Again, to me, you get more reps individually with those guys, which expedites their development and their growth. To me, that's the biggest thing that I see out of it, because it's time it'll be interesting to see. At one point in time, I remember tallying just the individual reps throughout the course of a practice, and I bet you that we're probably getting close to 200. I remember even at Ohio State we would do that, and because we would split the guys up into 2 or 3 different groups, you're getting like 250 reps per practice versus getting 100 reps during Indy time. You know what I mean? So to me, that expedites those guys' growth, and they're not just standing around watching, because they're actually in the fire, if that makes sense. So to me, that's the biggest benefit when it comes to having multiple coaches, And there's times that, Jeff may be in the middle of something, or I may be in the middle of something. Hey, you take these guys, you take these guys. And even at some point in time, just because we know guys at different stages in their careers, it may be a time to split the room up. It's a different type of meeting for these veteran guys versus these true freshman guys who won't get here to this summer, if that makes sense. So I think you're able to maximize the number of coaches that you have in the room, in my opinion.
Jeff, I want to ask you about a guy that's actually not in your room, but you've coached guys blocking for Sutton Smith before, now again. What stands out to you about him?
Yeah, I think he's really come on in these last 3 practices with some explosive runs, running through arm tackles, and I think a little bit of it too is him gelling with the front, with the O-line. Like right now we're battling through some of our mid-zone stuff, and it's such a timing and like angle play. And I think Sutton's got a lot of reps with that, and as we kind of work the kinks out, getting him in the flow with the offensive line. But from a leadership standpoint, from him to be able to come in and kind of just demand the room in some sense. But man, I'd also be impressed with. I'm impressed with Russ. Like Braylon's done an incredible job in my opinion, and I know Coach kind of hit on it the other day. Like the amount of effort that guy plays with it's so refreshing, to be honest with you. And because I think it's contagious, and I think that it's like bringing guys along with him in some sense. But no, I've known Sut for a long time. He's done a nice job.
Jeff, I was going to ask about Terrence. Kind of, were you familiar with him coming out of high school? Kind of, how did he pop up on y'all's radar once he entered the portal? It's not often you see a guy go from D2 to SEC.
Yeah, I think it was probably just after he put his name in the portal, his head coach reached out to Coach Silverfield and kind of put us on him and sent some film over, and, we got rolling from there. And then it heated up quick. Next thing you know, I mean, if you just refresh Twitter, it's like this guy was getting 5 offers a second. And we moved fast on it. We had him up maybe within 24 hours, him and his family, and, his representation is actually up here in Fayetteville. So it all kind of fit together there. But I think what you look at when you're evaluating guys is you're looking at their movement, and you're looking at their ability to bend, change direction. and mobility. And sometimes it is harder to, when you look at lower level film, to project. And I think that's something I struggle with sometimes, to have the conviction and sign off on a guy, because you just don't know how does it translate with the size of the guys, the speed of the game. But what you knew is he played young, played a lot, highly intelligent, and I think like Coach Johnson said, I think he got here and it was kind of at first when he got in that weight room, and everybody was just as big, and a lot of them were bigger, so it was a learning curve for him. But he's kind of settled in and playing pretty good ball right now. He's been really, really impressive through the transition, in my opinion.
You said he's played like 3 different spots in the offensive line. Where do you see him in the future? Do you see him as a tackle? Do you see him on the interior? Kind of what do you project?
Yeah, I think we like leaving him on the edge right now as he learns the system, and because I think he's got another step of development that's going to occur in the weight room. We'll put some mass on that lower body and get some horsepower in there. Right now he's doing it all off athletic ability. Like he's playing with good feet, playing with length. In my opinion, on the interior, we're going to have to put a little more horsepower in the lower half, but that'll come with time and reps. But right now he's having a ton of success on the edge. And so not in a hurry to move him inside. We're a little deeper inside right now anyway. But does he end up finding a home? I don't know. Where at? I think the biggest thing, and I tell these guys, we tell them all the time, like, be versatile. Like, build value for yourself. If you can play multiple positions, then it's not a matter of, like, I have to put the backup at this position in. We're putting the 6th guy in. We're putting the 7th guy in, and we'll shuffle the O-line so that we always have the best 5 in the game. If that makes sense.
I want to ask you about Kavion Broussard, what he's looked like for you guys.
He's an athletic dude. He's an athletic, twitched up young man. I think football is important to him, so he's still growing. He's still a young player too, I think he started 1 game last year, if I'm not mistaken, but a ton of potential and upside with him. As most young guys are, I think there's still some development to do with him from a weight room standpoint, in my opinion, as well as technique and fundamentals. Because kind of like what he said about Terrence, some things Kavion could get away with because of his athleticism. Versus we know that if he's facing a day 1 first-round pick, he can get exposed for it, if that makes sense. So I think he still has a ways to go, but he's willing and he's trying to please, man. And he's an athletic, twitched-up dude, and he plays the game with the right demeanor for the most part.
You on that Toledo 2015 team? Were you a GA then?
I was a GA.
Yeah.
That was my first year out.
Yeah, that was one of Arkansas's probably 2 better teams in the last decade or so. What do you remember about that game? I think it was like 16-12.
Down in Little Rock.
Yeah, down in Little Rock.
Yeah. I think the number one thing was the experience, the game day experience, the atmosphere, and that's a big difference from the MAC. I don't know if any of you guys have experienced Wednesday night MACtion. I've done it live, okay, playing at 8:30 and it's 10 below zero. But, the first thing was the environment. It was electric. We had a good team. We had a veteran team that year too. I don't really remember the ins and outs quarter to quarter, to be exact, but I know that there was going into that one. It was like, oh man, we're gonna have to hang on up front. I remember feeling that way, but yeah, I don't know.
How many times have you coached against Arkansas in Arkansas?
Trying to think.
And any memorable moments, any memorable games that jump out to you?
Other than I'm undefeated against them, whether it was Mississippi State or Missouri. Not really, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. Josiah, good-looking kid. I'm wondering, like, how you guys first got him to Memphis, because he had a lot of offers out there, and then he's dropped a ton of weight. Just like what has happened with his development? Where do you see his future?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we flipped Josiah from Mississippi State to Memphis. my opinion, relationship. And when he entered the portal, he came here because of relationship, and I think that for him, we've stood on what we told him from day one. And, and I think that he trusts us and that we're looking out for obviously his development and his future. But yeah, when Joe got to us, 368 pounds day one last June. And by the end of the season, I think the lowest he got was 326. And he's kind of leveled out about 333. But when he walks in the room, I think a lot of people assume he's the fourth, fifth year guy, and he's an 18-year-old freshman. So he's still learning. And man, I'll tell you, night and day different right now than he even was last fall. And he is growing at a rapid rate. But I think that's our style of recruiting, though, relationships. College football is crazy right now with the transfer portal and all of the things and that come into it. But, I still feel like to develop or to build offensive line rooms, you have to do it with your kind of guys that believe in what we're doing, believe in the system, believe in the culture, but ultimately are relationship driven. Like if it's about a transaction, next guy. Not real interested in it because we won't find guys that love football because football it's hard. Day in and day out, it's hard to play offensive line. It's going to be hard to play it in the SEC. And so if guys are making decisions for really anything else other than their development, then they're making the wrong decision, in my opinion.
And just both of you guys, I think we talked just about everybody, but I don't know if we've mentioned Adam Hawks and Cash Courtney.
In my opinion, just going to Hawks, he's got some football savviness to him for a young guy. In my opinion, he does a great job communicating up front. You know what I mean? And he's got some toughness to him, man. He's an athletic dude. I think he's got a bright future, in my opinion. He's putting in the work. I think he can continue to gain a little more mass to his body, man. But he's definitely putting in the time. I bet you, and I'm not around these guys 24/7, but I bet you he's one of the guys in the room that's investing more time, just as much or more than anybody in the room. You can tell he works at it. Every day after practice, he's reaching out to us, wanting to work on a drill, whether it be a pass game or run game, to get better. You know what I mean? So it's important to him. With Cash, obviously, Cash is just coming back to us, you know what I mean? But you see an athletic dude, I think he's a natural communicator as well up front, you know what I mean? And Cash, he's got some strength to him, man. I think he's got some natural, functional strength to him, man. And thank God, that he chose to stay here. You know what I mean? I think he's got a bright future ahead of him, but I still think he's still learning just because he hadn't been in the fire as long or as much as those other guys since spring ball started. But I think he's on the right track with us just getting him back full time this week,
Yep, Mark, you said no real memories of coaching against Arkansas. What about playing against Arkansas? You went to Ole Miss, right?
Oh, definitely got some memories. I know somebody else in there got some memories too. 2001. That was probably my first welcome to the SEC moment. I think it was 7 overtimes when we set that record for the longest game in the history of college football played, man. And Arkansas came to us, and I just remember a back and forth game, man. And, Arkansas ended up beating us on a failed 2-point conversion at the end of the game, man. But, for me, it was that welcome to the SEC moment. Just banging against those dudes, man, for freaking 4.5 hours or however long it was. And it was a night game, too. I'd imagine it had to be about freaking 12 o'clock, almost 12 o'clock in the morning when that thing ended. And to be honest with you, I remember Matt Jones as being a beast. You know, obviously Eli was playing in that game, but you know, being honest and real with you, I think Matt Jones was the best player on the field that day. I think he rushed for over 200 and some yards against us. So it's a great battle, man. A game that I would never ever forget. Most memorable game. That was that game. And it's like, man, is every SEC game gonna be like this? So that was it. Thank you, guys.
Just to be clear, undefeated.